2:32. We're going to get started. I'd like to say that I met Senator Haywood probably 2 years ago. We made a presentation on police reform in Snyder County. And this austere gentleman is the senator for Philadelphia and also Montgomery County. He has been known to actually putting facts and data together. He did a report 2 years ago on poverty, which was an unbelievable report. And today we have the pleasure of listening to a new report he was able to put together based on facts and data called The State of Black Pennsylvania. Without further ado, I introduce you to Senator Haywood.
So thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone who is spending time with us this afternoon. I've been in the Pennsylvania State Senate since 2015 and have had a long interest even before that in how to improve the lives of African Americans in Pennsylvania and beyond. And one of the things that I was able to look at was the condition of African Americans over time.
What's that? I said, have you ever heard that young?
Can everyone hear me?
Just briefly. I'm working for
Excuse me.
He can breathe.
Okay, well, everybody turn their mics off. Sound off, please.
Thank you so much. So I've been fortunate.
Oh, Senator Haywood.
Yes.
Before we get started, I noticed that Sharif Street is on. Sharif, can you basically say something very quickly?
Well, look, I want to first thank Mike. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank my colleague, Senator Haywood, for his work on the state of Black Pennsylvania. Whether there are so many critical areas from poverty to infant to maternal mortality to employment that he studied. I, as a member of the caucus who works with him every day, had a chance to get a preview of what he's doing, and I think it is that there's a saying: if you can't measure it, you won't be able to. It's not meaningful, and so he has quantified so many of the metrics that are very important to us, creating policy that will move the quality of life of Black Pennsylvanians forward. And so I thank him for the work he's doing, and I feel privileged to serve with him. And of course, he is a Morehouse man.
So thank you so much, Senator Street. And you all know Senator Street is a tremendous leader for Democrats throughout Pennsylvania, Democrats throughout the nation, and a key leader in the Pennsylvania State Senate. He did join me in a press conference on February 28th of this year, where we launched a report on the state of Black Pennsylvania. And during that press conference, Senator Street made some significant remarks to highlight some of the changes that have occurred in Black Pennsylvania. Let me tell you a little bit more about the background of the report. For many years, I've seen the Urban League State of Black Pennsylvania, Black America report. And the Urban League's report has been issued year after year, really decade after decade. And what it has done is shown the differences between African Americans and whites and how we have compared African Americans to whites in America. My report does not do that. Instead, it focuses on the condition of African Americans in 2010 to 2021. It's essentially a decade look at our progress or lack thereof in Pennsylvania. I have long felt that the Black to white comparison was not a good measurement of our position in the United States because the Black to white comparison does not take into account 200 years of enslavement, 100 years of segregation, and continuing systemic racism. And that comparison just doesn't take into account when you have a snapshot. Instead, the Black to Black comparison will show what kind of progress we're making over time. And my key question here has been, what can we do in this decade that will be better than the last? So I was fortunate to have the support of the Senate Democratic Caucus, which was able to do all of the research in the report. And I'm going to bring up the report now. So as you can see, let me get this into the beginning. report that has a few significant takeaways. Let me get to the next screen. I was really startled to see that the condition of African Americans in Pennsylvania had some significant progress, particularly given all of the media that focuses on the Black deficit model. That is the model of what Black people don't have. So here are some big takeaways that were, I got to tell you, startling to me. First, in this decade, 2010 to 2021, that's the time period we're looking at, incarceration at the state went down dramatically, 32% by 8,000 individuals. We've heard much about mass incarceration as a challenge in the United States, but here in Pennsylvania, as a result of public policy, Black incarceration in the state system went down dramatically. This is not the county system. This is the state system. And this is a significant change because for many decades, the incarceration rate has been going up since the 1980s. Second, higher education, particularly for African American males, went up significantly in the last decade. We know that higher education and education in general is a path to opportunity. It's startling to me to see that we have really increased the number of African Americans in higher education in Pennsylvania. Next, which was also a surprise, the number of African Americans earning $100,000 a year, households $100,000 a year and more, also went up significantly. And I know there has been inflation during this period, but to see this significant growth in income is really a good sign for our economic position. There's no more Cosby's on the television show, but African Americans' income has been going up. That's also the case in terms of median income, increased by $11,000, which is better than the pace of inflation during this period of time. Poverty, as you can see, also went down. Now, of course, we still have access to education issues. We still have poverty issues, but to see that the direction is down is important. Healthcare access also went up. This is, I think, a direct result of Obamacare, which made sure that we have more access to healthcare. And this is also a significant improvement. Now, my report did also find that our conditions in terms of diabetes and heart disease were still very challenging. On a few negative sides, home ownership went down. This is not a good sign. It's something we need to look carefully at in the current decade, because we know that home ownership is one of the key sources of wealth for African Americans and Americans in general. What you might not be surprised to see is that hate crimes, particularly anti-Black hate crimes, went up. This is, I believe, a direct result of the former president, who is currently under 4 indictments for his alleged misconduct. Anti-Semitism obviously went up as well. So some of this report has findings that were not surprising at all. Hate crimes up. Others had indications that were surprising, at least surprising to me in particular, because the standard story of African Americans in Pennsylvania or any place else is deficit, what we don't have. This does not mean we don't have serious challenges. We do. This is not a report that looks at everything. We looked at income, education, healthcare, hate crimes. It is a report that was produced by the Pennsylvania State Senate Caucus, and I'm so glad with the research team that was able to produce this report. I have one more slide to share that is not part of this report. And this is what I believe where we will be in 2024 if we do our work as Democratic leaders and activists in Pennsylvania. In 24, We will already have Congressman Evans in the Philadelphia area and Congresswoman Lee in Pittsburgh. Having two African-American congresspeople in Pennsylvania is something that is very new, in fact, and historic. We have a historic Lieutenant Governor Davis. We have the combination of Speaker McClinton and Appropriations Chair Jordan Harris. It's a typo. Having that combination is historic. We had K. Leroy Irvis as a speaker, but while he was speaker, the Appropriations Chair was not an African American. We also have Minority Appropriations Chair Hughes. So in the Pennsylvania General Assembly, we've got unprecedented levels of African American leadership. Also in the courts, we have Lori Dumas, and hopefully, that's why I have 2024, we will have Tamika Lane if we do our work. We have Mayor Gainey in Pittsburgh. We do our work, we'll have Mayor Parker in Philadelphia, as well as the first woman African-American commissioner, county commissioner in Montgomery County, Jamila Winder. The Philadelphia City Council is predominantly African-American. This creates historic opportunities for African Americans in the effort of governing our Commonwealth, whether it's in local government, whether it is in state government. We'll have more influence on the court and in Congress. I believe in part our challenge is what we can do with this new power that we have and how we can organize this power for our benefit. And so the historic changes in leadership, in political leadership in Pennsylvania, and these changes to our position in health, income, education, I think are all tremendous signs for what's ahead for African Americans in Pennsylvania. I would like to conclude with some significant demographic changes for our nation that will accompany some of these changes for African Americans. You may have seen census reports that indicate that by 2045, our nation will be a majority non-white. That's in the next 20 years. We'll have Blacks and Browns, and we've got to prepare our nation and ourselves for new leadership positions. Here in Philadelphia, 40% of the city is African American. 30% of Philadelphia population is white. And I'm often in conversations with people who they begin to talk about the minorities. And I sometimes remind them that in Philadelphia, whites are in the minority. And this whole characterization of who is and is not a minority will be changing in the next 20 years as the demographics of our state change and our nation change as well. I believe this makes it even more important that we compare ourselves to where we have been so that we can continue to make progress decade to decade. And that the decade that we are currently in, I believe we need to do all that we can do to make sure it is significantly better than the decade that just concluded. I'd be glad to take any questions on either big picture or any particular findings. I have gone to a number of cities to share the report, including Allentown, Reading, Scranton, Lancaster, and we had some tremendous feedback from local leaders about the challenges that they see in their hometowns. One of the big things that I've heard consistently is that the K-12 experience is very challenging. And certainly in any future report, we will make sure we take a closer look on K-12 experiences. But glad to take any questions about what the report includes and any questions about any of the slides or what I have shared. Thank you, Michael, and all those who are here. I don't think I'm the moderator, so I'm going to hold off on responding to those questions until directed.
Senator, thank you for that compelling insight. Are there any questions that folks have on what was presented? If you have any, please hit the raise your hand button and we'll identify you and give you an opportunity to pose your question.
David? David?
Yes.
Yeah. So I did my slides pretty quickly this morning. And the slide does not include, but should include, Sharif Street as an African-American chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, also part of the historic state leadership. That was an oversight, unfortunately, as it was not getting Jordan Harris's name right.
No problem, Senator. Well, we appreciate your support. You have been consistent in helping me get there, so I appreciate the support.
Thank you for noting that correction. Any questions from the general audience? And if not, we'll ask if there are any questions from the panelists.
I would say, I do have a question. What is the next step? What do you think, Senator Haywood? What is the next step that we can use this information?
Thank you so much. So I can tell you directly for me, it showed me that we need to take a great focus on home ownership and have some strategies to build African-American home ownership, given that's where we were in decline. And so whether that is financial literacy activity, looking at any barriers to home ownership, but for me, I think having a priority that focuses on increasing African-American home ownership is an important takeaway from this legislation. I'm glad to see that hopefully Mayor Parker has a focus on increasing Black wealth, and home ownership is certainly part of that. So for me, that was the number one takeaway. Second, I think we can take some time to drill down on the policies that help to create the change. So for instance, Senator Street and I in the General Assembly have been part of a number of legislative initiatives along with Governor Wolf to drive down incarceration. And so the leadership of Tom Wolf and our support of him really had an impact in driving down the incarceration. The public policy of Obama, getting Obamacare passed, that public policy has an impact on increasing individuals who have access to healthcare. So we have public policies that can change lives, that have changed lives. Now, it's always important to reevaluate them and look at new ones that can be as effective. I'll give you another example. My final example is Senator Street is leading an effort to create access to adult marijuana. And so he's had a lot of leadership focusing closely on making sure there's equitable access to the ownership, to the growers. And so that when there is a new business opportunity, and this is going to be a business created out of the General Assembly, trying to do all we can to make sure that African Americans, the Black and Browns, can participate in it. And that's public policy being led by Senator Street, and which will have a significant impact, I do believe, on Black wealth. So I do believe that intentionality in policy will make a significant difference going into the decade that we're currently in.
Okay. We have a question from the attendee, OC Oliver Candidate. OC.
Thank you very much, Mike and Senator Haywood. Thank you for doing this report. It's outstanding, and it shows some tremendous progress in a number of areas for the Black population of Pennsylvania. I just have one question that wasn't covered in the report, and that question is, how have the number of registered Black voters changed over the last decade? Is that up or down, or how does that look?
I do not have that information, OC. So voter participation was not in the report. So it was not one of the things that we measured, but it's certainly something we can measure as we go forward. but it was not one of the things that was measured. So I do not have an answer to that one.
All right, thank you. It's very important to know that, though. So I'm glad to hear that you would consider including it in any future measurement.
If I may.
Next question, we have Linda Miller. Who's got a question?
Yes. Good afternoon, Senator Haywood. How are you?
Good.
My question is, one of the things I'd like to know, we have all these discussions about public education, charter school education. I was wondering, did you do a comparison regarding the graduation rate to see if that has changed in the last 10 years in the Black community?
Yeah, we didn't look at K to 12, so I don't have that, but certainly it's been highlighted in almost all the conversations I've been in that I do need to do that, and I commit to do that in the next report along with the voter participation.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, next we have a question from Corinne. Corinne from the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Corinne Landauer. Hi, Senator Haywood. Thank you. I echo everyone's sentiments. Thank you for this tremendous report. I do just want to give an update on the voter participation. The Black Caucus, the Montgomery County Chapter Democratic Black Caucus, led by Linda Fields, myself, and Lisa Rhodes, who I believe is also on this call, and Mike Laws. We have been working on an initiative to be able to capture the Black voters of Montgomery County, working with every campaign that comes through Montgomery County. So if you're out there and you are canvassing, make sure that you are helping us to capture that data. It's a very simple activist code that you apply through Vote Builder, and it's MCBC. So when we have data on that, we can help to provide that to you for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Denise Rose, the co-chair of the Pennsylvania State Democratic Black Caucus. And Senator Haywood, thank you so much for your presentation. I found your perspective very, very interesting in that with your data collection, it was a paradigm shift rather than doing a comparison between the white population in the state versus the Black population in the state. You chose to focus from a more historical perspective with your data collection. I'm just very interested in wondering what was your motivation in changing the paradigm shift in terms of data collection for the African American community?
Yeah, thanks so much. So some of it is just personal. You know, when I think about my family, how we're doing, we compare how we were to how we are. We don't compare ourselves to any kind of white people. I'm not sure we'll even be. But just from a family perspective, we're like, how are we doing? And we compare to how we are now to where we have been. So that's part of it. Second, I think more fundamentally, maybe not more fundamentally, I have felt that the Black to white comparison is always a snapshot of where we are compared to Black to whites on a certain date. And never does it really account for the 200 years of enslavement, the 100 years of segregation, and current systemic racism. And so if you are in a race and you start off the race 300 years behind, any kind of snapshot, you're still going to be behind any kind of snapshot. So I did not feel that was a comparison that had enough historical context. The other thing is, I believe that it's critical that we maximize our own power and focus on what we can do within our own communities and build from what we have. My uncle told me, build on your strengths. And so what this report has helped us to do, in my opinion, is focus on what we have and how we can build it, how we can make the next decade, this decade, better than the next. So it is a significant strategic change, paradigm change. I do agree with you with that assessment. But I also think that this strategy of how we can build our community is the strategy I think that will allow us to move forward.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you. And
you.
I have one more question. And before I ask my question, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge our chair, Senator Street, who has been a phenomenal support to the caucus since my involvement with the caucus. Senator Street, good afternoon, and thank you for attending. My second question has to do with someone mentioned voter participation in the community. And I'm very happy to say that I had the opportunity to participate in a program sponsored by the party, the Democratic Party, Voter Chase, in which Lisa Rhodes, Howard Mosley, and the chair, Chair Street, determined that it would be a good thing to not just try to register folks to vote, but to actually find those who are already registered and encourage them to actually become a active participant in the voting process. Because one of the issues that I have come across in my interaction with many people in the community is that although they are registered, many have not been motivated enough to actually get out and cast their vote for the candidates of their choice. And so what would be a recommendation that you would make to encourage people in the African American community to get out and vote?
Yeah, thanks so much. So Senator Street and I have had a number of conversations on this topic, and we're currently involved in getting those 35 and under to have higher participation in this election in 2019. So what we did was look at those who voted in 2020, the presidential election, which is, a lot of excitement, and compared it to 2019, which is the off-year election. And what we found is there are thousands of 35 and unders who did vote in 2020, but did not vote in 2019. What we did to help identify a motivating message, because I think we do need a motivating message, is do focus groups with that age group. So I think the core assumption is we don't know what is going to motivate them. And what we have to do is ask them. And the focus groups allow us to do so. And so in the focus groups, this is going to change election to election. So what I'm getting ready to say now is not going to apply for 2024. But in the focus groups that we just completed, we found out that this age group was very concerned about protecting abortion rights and pro-choice. We also produced a graphic, which was Martin Luther King getting arrested by police officers in the 1960s. And this arrest of Martin Luther King in the 1960s was accompanied by a question mark, was it all in vain? This graphic was very motivating for the focus group that we had. So my core advice is do focus groups to find out what will motivate these young people. Test some messages on them. And then once you do, I use a standard message, standard approach to getting people to come out to vote, knock the doors, call them, target social media, and text them.
Okay, next question, Sandra Thompson.
So I had a couple of questions. And again, thank you for all that you do. With the education, it seems that K through 12 is where there was a decrease through a 10-year time span. Do you believe that has anything to do with homeschooling, or did you include that homeschooling, online schooling?
So why were there fewer kids in K to 12? That we don't have a rationale for, although that is a demographic. But whether in homeschool or charter or elsewhere, we don't have that. That would require more research than we were able to conduct.
Okay. The other thing is, and I heard you speak several times about how we are becoming the majority. So I noticed that with the healthcare increase, there was also a decrease in childbirths in the Black community, and particularly for those under 50 years old. And it looked like a 31,000 drop in 10 years. So what would you attribute that to? And especially in light of conspiracy theorists, of healthcare and to the Black woman and the decrease in childbirths and lining that up with who is now going to be the majority. Will people of color be majority? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So generally speaking, I don't follow any the conspiracy theories, just from a level setting perspective. The decrease in childbirth over that period of time, we don't have a full analysis of. I will say, though, that in terms of the demographics of the United States, the white childbirth is on a very much downward trajectory, much more aggressive than for African Americans if we did the Black to white comparisons. The other thing is that when we look at the majority, that's Black and browns. And so the Hispanic population is really increasing in level of childbirth as well. But if you did the Black to white, you would see the white population is childbirth declining more rapidly.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next question, we've got Michael Keys, our Secretary of the Black Caucus. Michael Keys. Unmute.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for putting on this panel. It was a real eye-opener. A couple takeaways for me was that it's ironic that our incomes went up, but our home ownership went down. And so it would probably take some digging into whether there's a resurgence of redlining by our banks or something else being done to undermine our home ownership, even though we're making more money. Number two, I'm city councilman here in Erie, Pennsylvania, and the trends that you are seeing I don't believe they've reached up here. We're still, poverty way above the national average and the state average. Social medical outcomes, healthcare outcomes, just about all the way across the board, we're lagging behind, the progress that's being made by apparently by African Americans, across the state. And I just don't know what they're doing in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and other places that made it more beneficial for us over the past 10 years. That we can implement or strategize here in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. And pretty much every roundtable I did was clearly differentials in the experiences. The state experience is not necessarily the Erie experience or the Lancaster experience, so there's definitely differentials. What I think we have found, though, and this requires actually some more assessment as well, is that there is higher education benefits. And so the more African Americans that get in and out of higher education, that has a significant income on African American income. And if you look at over time, African American participation in higher education, at least in Pennsylvania, has gone up. National story is a little bit is not the same as the Pennsylvania story. So that is, I think, a significant cause on the income side. The other thing I would say in terms of the poverty, there was a recent report that in Philadelphia, poverty went down. Now, it didn't go down as fast as we would like it to see, but that was just a report I think that was released within the last, and it was in the last 3 weeks. So what I would say is that one of the things to me that is significant in the report is that it does show that we can make progress over time. It doesn't mean we will make progress over time, but it means that we can make progress over time. We just take a tremendous amount of effort to get it done.
Okay. All right. We have one more question submitted by Stephanie. Okay. And her question is, what do you think contributed to the decline in home ownership? And is gentrification or development part of the problem?
So I don't have an answer that's related to the research because our research didn't drill that far down. I can tell you that there was a very recent case here in the Philadelphia area where a large bank was found guilty of redlining. And so redlining to make it more difficult for African Americans to get loans for homes persists. It persists. It's not just the 50s and the 60s. It's today. That's certainly a significant challenge. Beyond the stories of redlining, I haven't seen any kind of real assessment, and that will require some more research. However, I will say this. There have been efforts in the United States to increase African American home ownership when they're specifically directed with marketing, financial literacy, getting to the lending institutions. So I'm confident that this is something we can address and improve over time. And let me be more clear. If we all on this call dedicate ourselves to increasing African American home ownership in the decade that we are in, I am fully confident that we will achieve that end.
Hello?
Yes, Sharif.
Senator Haywood, if I may, I just want to add on the home ownership issue. In the part of the confirmation hearings for the incoming banking secretary, I talked about the fact that we need to address issues around redlining, and looking at how the state could be proactive in making sure there's adequate enforcement for the Community Reinvestment Act provisions. Also, Senator Hughes has a bill that sits in my committee that we try to get. I think the House may run a version of it that would expand the requirements for something akin to Community Reinvestment Act at the state level. And so I think there are those of us being proactive in that regard. I can't remember who has the bill in the House, but there is a version of the Hughes bill in the House that I believe that the House is going to run.
And the last thing I would like to close with, if I could, is the slide that I ended with, which is a tremendous level of African American influence across the state, in the national government, and in our localities. It means that we have new power to create the change that we want to see. And we are now governing the state. We are governing Philadelphia. We are governing Pittsburgh. We are governing Montgomery County and probably additional counties as well. This is a power that is unusual. It hasn't been in my lifetime where African Americans have had the level of political power that we do today. And for me, this is a tremendous opportunity to make the current decade better than the last.
Okay. Thank you so much, Senator. We do appreciate your ability to actually adjust your schedule, especially on a Sunday, to come and actually give a speech and talk about the importance, of the report. And we sincerely thank you for the Black Caucus. All of the committee members, we can sincerely thank you. Okay.
Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Senator.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.